To chop garlic, begin by slicing off the end of a clove of garlic. Lay the flat side of a knife on top of the clove and push down firmly to crush it. This makes it easier to remove the skin. Again, using the flat side of the knife, press down on the peeled clove, crushing it well. The crushed garlic clove can then be finely chopped. Prepare lobster alive using a chef's knife. Place the lobster on a cutting board. Holding the tail firmly with a cloth, push the point of the knife down through the center of the head right to the cutting board. Pivot the lobster and cut it lengthwise from head to tail. Then separate the lobster in two, cutting the head lengthwise as well. Remove the liver and the coral, which you can use to make a sauce. Remove the sand sac located near the head and carefully take out the intestine located under the tail. To make sushi, you need a bamboo mat, sheets of nori seaweed, cooked Japanese white rice, fresh salmon, and cucumber. To start, place a sheet of nori on the bamboo mat and add the cooked and chilled white rice. Arrange strips of salmon and cucumber on the rice. Using the mat, roll the garnished sheet of nori into a tight cylinder. Then remove the bamboo mat and cut the roll into 3/4 inch slices. Blanching is a method of briefly boiling a tomato to make it easier to remove its peel. First, remove the stalk and cut a shallow X in the skin at the base of the tomato. Next, immerse the tomato in boiling water for about 20 seconds. Remove the tomato with a skimmer and plunge it immediately into ice water. Using a sharp knife, peel the skin from the tomato delicately, taking care not to damage the flesh. To remove the seeds from a tomato, begin by cutting the peeled tomato in half horizontally. Hold one half in the palm of your hand and squeeze it lightly over a bowl, shaking it to release the seeds and juice. Breading a meat scallop involves coating it with a layer of breadcrumbs or a breadcrumb dressing before the meat is cooked. Scallops are usually breaded à l'anglaise. Begin by flattening the scallops with a mallet or cleaver. Then prepare 3 bowls. Pour some flour into the first bowl. Beat 1 or 2 eggs in the second bowl, adding a little oil, water, salt, and pepper, and put the breadcrumbs or breadcrumb dressing in the third bowl. First, roll the scallop in the flour. Then dip it into the beaten egg mixture, shaking it gently to remove any excess. Next, coat the scallop with the breadcrumbs or breadcrumb dressing, turning it over and pressing down firmly to ensure that it is well coated on both sides. To make filled pasta, start by following the recipe for preparing fresh pasta. Roll out a sheet of pasta as thinly as possible. Using a knife, cut the edges square. With a spoon, place small mounds of filling about 2 inches apart from one another. Use a kitchen brush to dab the pasta with a mixture of egg yolk and water. Then cover the pasta and filling with a second sheet of pasta. Use your fingers to press the 2 sheets of pasta together firmly around the mounds of filling. Cut the pasta with a pastry cutter. Be sure to seal the 2 sheets of pasta well to prevent the filling from leaking during cooking. To remove both the peel and the pith from the outside of a citrus fruit, begin by cutting a cap off of each end of the fruit. Stand the fruit upright and slice downward with a paring knife, removing the pith and the peel at the same time. Repeat this operation 1 segment at a time, turning the fruit as you go. To prepare a fresh hot pepper, cut it in half lengthwise. Using your knife, remove the stem, the white membrane, and the seeds. Be careful when preparing fresh peppers as they contain potentially irritating substances. It is generally a good idea to wear gloves. Poaching consists in cooking food slowly in hot liquid, generally coup bouillon. To prepare the coup bouillon, mix water and lemon juice in a stew pan and add salt, pepper, carrots, onion, celery, and a bouquet garni. Bring the liquid to a boil, simmer it for 30 minutes, and let it cool. Strain the coup bouillon to remove the bouquet garni. Place a piece of fish in the stew pan and cover it with coup bouillon. Heat the coup bouillon to the simmering point. Poach the fish for 10 minutes without boiling. Then let it cool in the coup bouillon, drain it, and place it on a platter. To fillet a fresh flatfish, use a long, flexible knife. Flatfish should be separated into 4 fillets, 2 on either side of the backbone. To skin the fish, start by cutting into the skin near the tail. Pull the skin back as far as the head. Repeat the procedure for the skin on the ventral or belly side. To remove the fillets, make a lengthwise incision in the center of the fish to divide it into 2 fillets. Then insert the blade between the flesh and the backbone and gradually detach the fillet from the head towards the tail. Detach the other fillet from the lateral bones by running the blade along its entire length. Remove the intestines. Turn the fish over and repeat the operation to remove the other 2 fillets. The fillets are now ready to be prepared for cooking. Cutting off the fins of a fish you intend to serve whole is called trimming. Using kitchen scissors, cut off the fins from back to front. You can start with the belly, trimming off the ventral and anal fins. Then remove the pectoral and dorsal fins. Complete the process by cutting the tail into a V shape. Fish are usually scaled with a scaler or the blunt edge of a knife. Firmly grasp the tail of an ungutted fish in one hand and holding the knife at a 45-degree angle in the other hand, scrape towards the head to remove the scales. This can be done inside a plastic bag or under running water to prevent the scales from scattering. To fillet a fresh rounded fish, use a long, flexible knife. Rounded fish should be separated into 2 fillets, 1 on either side of the backbone. Start by laying the fish on its side. Holding your knife horizontally, make an incision along the backbone from the tail to the base of the head. Separate the flesh from the backbone from the tail towards to the head. Then remove the fillet from the head by cutting it behind the gills down to the backbone, and remove it lengthwise. To remove the skin from the fillet, make an incision about 3/4 of an inch from the tail. Holding the tail firmly, slide the knife between the skin and the flesh and gently detach the skin. Repeat the operation for the second fillet. The fillets are now ready to be prepared for cooking. To trim and core a pineapple, first slice off the top and bottom. Holding the pineapple firmly upright, slice off the skin just below the surface in vertical strips. Remove the remaining eyes by making thin diagonal cuts in the flesh with the knife. Cut the peeled pineapple into slices, and remove the core from each slice using a small cookie cutter. Searing refers to cooking food briefly at very high heat in order to seal the outer surfaces. To sear a piece of meat, pour a bit of oil into a skillet. When the oil is very hot, place the meat in the pan and cook it briefly on both sides. In cooking, the term sweating means lowering the water content of certain vegetables. To sweat mushrooms, melt a bit of butter in a skillet. Add thinly sliced mushrooms and cook them until they lose their water. Shaping a carrot involves trimming a section of carrot with a paring knife to obtain an oblong shape. To begin, cut peeled and washed carrots into segments of the desired length. Holding a segment of carrot between the thumb and forefinger, make a slight circular movement to give the surface a slightly rounded shape. Repeat this operation, rotating the carrot until the desired shape is obtained. In addition to cooking more evenly, shaped carrots can be used to accompany a number of dishes. Keep the carrot shavings for use in soups or as a flavorful garnish. To prepare vanilla, split the pods in two lengthwise. Using a knife, scrape the vanilla beans out of the pods. If you use vanilla to flavor hot liquids such as milk, syrup, or fruit juice, let the pods steep for 20 to 30 minutes in the liquid. Then add the beans and continue steeping for another 10 minutes. Strain the liquid before consuming it. Before starting, cut off a very thin slice of skin so that the squash will lie flat on your cutting surface. Next, cut the squash in half lengthwise. Use a spoon to scoop out the seeds and fibers. After cutting the squash into quarters, cut the flesh from the skin using a sharp knife. With a paring knife, first remove the stalk and the sepal from the apple. Then cut it into two pieces. Again, using the knife, remove the core of the apple. It is now ready for use. To remove the zest from a citrus fruit, hold the fruit in the palm of your hand and cut strips into the rind with a paring knife. Before removing the zest, be sure to rinse the fruit well. Chop the separated strips of zest into small pieces with a sharp knife. To prepare the artichoke, first break off the stalk with your hands. Cut off the tough leaves around the base of the artichoke, taking care not to remove the more tender ones. Then trim the remaining leaves at the base to give it an even shape. Finally, trim off the top third of each leaf. To prevent artichokes from discoloring, place them in lemon water until you are ready to cook them. To prepare asparagus, begin by cutting off a portion of the woody base of the stalk with a sharp knife. Then use a vegetable peeler to peel the asparagus, working from the tip to the base. Tie the asparagus stalks into a small bundle. Boil or steam them. Once cooked, the bundled asparagus can be easily removed from the pot with a fork. Barding meat involves covering its surface with thin slices of fat to protect it from excessively high heat and to prevent it from drying out during cooking. Before barding the meat, sprinkle it with pepper and herbs. Surround the meat with a thin bard of fat. To hold the bard in place, start by slipping a length of kitchen string around the middle of the roast. Then secure the string at one end and loop it around the roast lengthwise. After bringing the string back to the starting point, make a series of loops around the roast from one end to the other. Finally, turn the roast over and thread the string through each of the loops. Then tie the loose end down firmly. Pounding meat scallops involves applying enough force to soften the muscle fibers and make the meat slightly flatter. Place the scallop between two sheets of plastic wrap, then pound it evenly with a mallet or meat tenderizer. The flat side of a cleaver will also do the trick. This process tenderizes overly fresh or unripened cuts of meat, making the flesh softer and easier to cook. Tenderized meat should be cooked immediately. To make bechamel sauce, you need to start by preparing a white roux. To do this, melt some butter in a thick-bottomed pot. Add an equal amount of flour and cook the roux at low heat for 2 minutes, stirring it all the while. When the roux is smooth, gradually add boiling milk, whisking the mixture constantly. Let the sauce cook for about 12 minutes. At the end of the cooking, add salt, pepper, and nutmeg. Place the butter in a small diameter saucepan and melt it over low heat. When it is liquefied, the butter separates into 3 layers: foam on the surface, fat in the middle, and whey on the bottom. Using a spoon, skim the foam off the surface. Then carefully pour the butter into a bowl without disturbing the whey at the bottom of the saucepan. The clarified butter is now ready to be used. Braising refers to cooking meat slowly at low heat in a small amount of liquid after browning it on all sides in fat or oil. To start, season the pieces of meat with salt and pepper. In a heavy-bottomed stew pan, brown the pieces in very hot oil and remove them. Then lightly brown an aromatic garnish in the hot oil for a few minutes and lower the heat. Place the pieces of meat back in the stew pan and add a small amount of broth. Depending on the type of braised meat, you can also cook it in water, meat juices, stock, red wine, or chopped tomatoes. Now add a bouquet garni. Cover the stew pan and cook at very low temperature until the meat is tender, for about 2 hours depending on the piece of meat. Longer braising in a covered stew pan produces thick, flavorful gravy. Preferably, spices should be crushed in a mortar. Place the spices in the mortar and using a pestle, grind them until they reach the desired fineness. Brunoise refers to a method of cutting vegetables into tiny dice about 1/4 of an inch thick. To start, level one of these surfaces of a washed and peeled vegetable such as a carrot. Using a sharp, fine-edged knife, slice the carrot lengthwise into strips about 1/4 of an inch thick. Stack these strips and cut them into thin slivers at even intervals. Stack the slivers and cut them crosswise into small dice. Vegetables cut into a brunoise can be used to make macédoine, mirepoix, soups, sauces, or stuffings. Holding the squid in one hand, pull on the tentacle portion to separate the head from the rest of the body. Then sever the tentacles above the eyes. Remove and discard the hard part in the middle. Wash the tentacles and set them aside. Now remove the transparent cartilage or pen from inside the squid body and throw it away. Pinch the end of the squid and slide your fingers along the body to press out any waste. Rinse the body under running water and remove the skin. Finally, remove the gills. The body, tentacles, and gills are now ready to be cooked. Cutting a chiffonade consists in shredding a leaf vegetable into strips of varying thickness. To cut spinach in this fashion, stack the washed and dried leaves, starting with the largest ones. Then roll the leaves tightly as you would a cigar, and cut the roll into strips of the desired thickness. A chiffonade can be prepared using lettuce leaves, endive, spinach, cabbage, basil, or sorrel. It makes a good garnish and adds a decorative touch to cold hors d'oeuvre. To peel and devein a shrimp, start by removing the head from the body. To remove the shell, gently slide your thumb between it and the flesh. Finally, make a small incision all the way along the vein on the back of the shrimp with the point of a knife. Then gently remove the intestine. Double boiler cooking consists in cooking food slowly in a pan immersed in a second larger pan containing boiling water. You can use a specially designed double boiler or place a vessel containing the food to be cooked above a saucepan of boiling water. The technique is particularly appropriate for melting chocolate. Cooking à blanc means cooking a preparation partially without browning it. It is also a synonym for baked blind, which refers to cooking an empty pie shell by placing a sheet of aluminum foil over the crust and covering it with peas to prevent the shell from rising. Bake for 10 to 15 minutes. Deep frying consists in cooking food by immersing it in very hot oil or grease. Foods such as potatoes, eggs, and certain small fish can be deep fried without being coated, while others need to be breaded, floured, or dipped in batter. Fill the deep fryer halfway with peanut oil and heat the oil to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Then immerse the food gently in the oil. When cooked, the food rises to the surface. Remove it immediately and drain it on paper towels. Once the oil has cooled, filter it and keep it in a dark place for reuse. Cooking something en papillote means cooking food such as fish sealed in aluminum foil. Start by tearing off a sizable sheet of aluminum foil. Using a kitchen brush, dab it lightly with oil. Fold the foil and cut it into a rounded shape. Unfold the foil and put the fish on it. Add salt, pepper, lemon, and aromatic garnish. Fold the edges of the foil over several times to seal the pouch and bake the papillote in the oven. Food placed in a pressure cooker is cooked by pressurized steam heated to above boiling point. Pour a very small amount of water into the pressure cooker. Then place the basket of food to be cooked at the bottom of the cooker, making sure it doesn't touch the water. Close the lid of the cooker, raise the pressure quickly, and then lower the heat to moderate. Time the cooking carefully, as food cooks very quickly in a pressure cooker. Steaming means cooking food by placing it above boiling water or broth. People generally use a vegetable steamer placed in a tightly covered pot. Before cooking vegetables, bring some water to a boil in a pot. When it is boiling, place the vegetables in the steamer about 3/4 of an inch above the water level. Arrange them in a single layer to ensure uniform cooking. Make sure they don't touch the water. Cover the pot tightly to keep in the steam and cook the vegetables until they are tender. Steaming retains not only food's flavor, but also its vitamins and minerals. To cut poultry into 6 pieces, lay the bird on its back. Insert a sharp chef's knife into the cavity and cut along the spine. Turn the bird over and open it up. Then cut it along the breastbone to separate it into 2 pieces. Cut the spine off the half to which it is attached and discard it. Place one of the halves on your work surface and inserting the blade of the knife between the thigh and the breast, cut the 2 pieces apart. Insert the tip of the knife into the wing joint and detach the wing. Repeat the operation for the other half of the bird. You now have 6 pieces, 2 wings, 2 legs, and 2 half breasts. Deglazing consists in dissolving caramelized meat juices clinging to the bottom of a pan in order to make a sauce or gravy. Remove the cooked meat and grease from the pan, leaving only the caramelized residues. Pour the deglazing liquid into the pan and turn the burner up to high. You can use water, wine, alcohol, stock, or sour cream for deglazing. With a spatula, scrape the caramelized meat juices and stir the mixture for 3 to 4 minutes. You can now use the resulting liquid to prepare a sauce or gravy. Skimming consists in removing the residue that forms during boiling at the surface of a liquid or preparation by means of a skimmer. For example, when making jam, you need to skim the foam from the surface of the jam throughout the cooking process. To dice an onion, begin by removing the skin. To do this, cut off the top and bottom of the onion, taking care to leave the base of the root intact to prevent the layers from separating. Then cut the onion in half through the stem and the root. Place half of the onion face down on a cutting board and make horizontal slices across the width, taking care not to cut through the root. Then slice the onion vertically to the desired thickness. Finally, chop the onion crosswise to obtain small dice. Thickening means making gravy or juices less liquid. Liquids are generally thickened with cornstarch. Start by bringing the liquid to a boil. In a small bowl, thin the cornstarch with cold water. Pour the cornstarch mixture into the boiling liquid and let it simmer for 3 to 4 minutes until the liquid reaches the desired thickness. Gutting a fish means removing its inner organs. After you have scaled the fish, make a light incision from the anus to the gills using kitchen scissors. With your fingers, detach the intestines at the anus and pull them forward to remove them. Now pull out the gills. Rinse the cavity under cold water. Using a spoon, scrape out the kidney and blood along the backbone and rinse again. You can now fillet the fish or cut it into pieces for cooking. To prepare fresh pasta, you need oil, flour, salt, and eggs. Begin by placing the eggs and oil in a well dug in the center of the flour and salt mixture. Using your hands, moisten the flour mixture by gradually folding it into center, and then mix well. Form the dough into a ball and let it stand for 30 minutes to 1 hour. Once this step is complete, flatten the dough slightly with a rolling pin on a floured work surface, and then divide it into 2 portions. Roll out each portion of dough into a rectangular shape and flatten by pressing firmly on the rolling pin to obtain a thin sheet of dough. Dust the dough with flour and roll it up to form a roll. Using a sharp knife, cut the roll of dough into strips about 1/4 inch wide. Finally, unroll the fresh pasta strips and spread them to dry on a cloth before cooking. To truss poultry, pass a length of kitchen string under the cavity and hold the drumsticks together. Cross the string and bring it back under the drumsticks. Pull the string over the top along each side of the bird. After crossing it under the end of the poultry, pull it to the top and knot it tightly. To mince fresh ginger, start by peeling the ginger with a well-sharpened knife. Level one of the sides so that the root lays flat on the work surface. Shave the ginger into thin slices. Then mince it finely. Grilling consists in cooking food at very high heat through direct contact with a cooking surface or under an oven broiler. Start by lightly oiling a ribbed griddle. Turn the heat up high, and when the griddle is very hot, place the food on it. Season with salt and pepper. When you grill meat, rotate it 45 degrees halfway through the cooking process in order to give it a grid look. Cook the meat once on each side, turning it only when the first surface is cooked as desired. Avoid poking holes in the meat while it cooks to prevent the meat juice from escaping. To open an oyster, place it on a cloth and holding it in the palm of your hand, insert an oyster knife between the upper and lower shells. Separate the shells by gently twisting the blade. Then sever the muscle attached to the upper shell. Now slide the blade underneath the oyster flesh to detach it from the lower shell. Julienne refers to a method of cutting raw vegetables or other foods into thin sticks about 1 1/4 to 2 inches long. To julienne carrots, level one side of a peeled and washed carrot so that it will lie flat on the work surface. Using a sharp, fine-edged knife, cut the carrot lengthwise into strips of the desired thickness. Then, Stack the strips and cut them into thin slivers. To prepare a mango, cut the fruit in half lengthwise along one side of the stone. Do the same on the other side so that only a very thin layer of flesh is left on the stone. With the tip of a knife, slice the flesh lengthwise and then across without piercing the skin. Turn the skin inside out so that the cubes of flesh pop up. Then simply slice the mango cubes from the skin with a knife. Marinating involves soaking a piece of meat in an aromatic liquid for a certain amount of time to make the flesh more tender and flavorful. Begin by placing the piece of meat in a relatively deep dish. Then add thinly sliced onions, carrots, and celery, along with a bouquet garni. Cover the entire contents of the dish with red wine, and add a drop or two of cognac. Then cover the dish with plastic wrap, and let it sit in a cool place for 6 hours to 2 days, depending on the size and quality of the meat. Turn the meat over several times during this period to ensure that the marinade is absorbed evenly. The marinade can later be used to deglaze the pan in which the meat is cooked or to make a sauce to accompany oven-roasted meat. If the meat is braised, the marinade can be used to provide additional moisture. To make mayonnaise, you need 3 egg yolks, a coffee spoon of Dijon mustard, a coffee spoon of lemon juice, canola oil, salt and pepper. Place a cloth under the bowl to keep it from sliding. Beat the egg yolks and mustard together in a bowl. Then add the salt, pepper, and lemon juice. Trickle the oil into the mixture, beating it all the while. The mayonnaise is ready when it is sufficiently firm. To clean mussels, start by removing the filaments attached to the shells using a knife. Wash and brush the mussels under cold running water before cooking them to remove any algae and parasites. Discard any mussels with broken shells or shells that remain open when you touch them. To wash a leek, begin by tearing off the tough outer leaves. Trim off the tops of the leaves and the woody part near the root. Make a lengthwise cut with a sharp knife from the top of the leek to about 3/4 of an inch from the base. Then, rinse the leek under cold running water while spreading the leaves to dislodge any dirt. To open a coconut, start by piercing holes in the soft areas at the top of the shell, or eyes, using a pointed instrument such as a screwdriver. Pour the coconut milk into a container and set it aside. Then place the coconut on a cloth and, using a hammer, hit the shell in the middle until it breaks. Use your hammer to break the coconut into several pieces. Detach the coconut meat and, using a vegetable peeler, remove the fine brown membrane covering the meat. Coconut meat can be eaten as is, grated or in pieces, and the milk can be used in sauces, soups, and ragouts. To whip egg whites, place them in a cold bowl. Using a pastry whisk, start by whipping the whites gently. As soon as they start to foam, increase the size of your circles to incorporate more air. The egg whites are ready when they form peaks when you lift them with the whisk. The first step in making dough involves preparing the yeast. Dissolve sugar and yeast in a little lukewarm water at a temperature of about 77 degrees Fahrenheit and mix to obtain a smooth paste. Let this mixture stand for a few minutes. In the meantime, prepare your flour, sugar, and salt and mix these dry ingredients together in a bowl. Once the yeast is ready, pour it into a well in the center of the dry ingredients. Mix the ingredients by hand, gradually folding the flour into the center. Continue working the dough until it forms a coarse, soft, and slightly sticky mass. We come now to the most important step in bread making, which is kneading. On a clean work surface, knead the dough with regular movements until it no longer sticks. Once you have obtained the desired texture, transfer the dough to a previously greased bowl and cover with plastic wrap or a damp cloth. Leave the dough to rise in a warm place until it doubles in volume. This operation can take from 1 to 2 hours. At the end of this step, punch the dough with your hand to release the gas bubbles, and then turn it back out onto the work surface. Shape the dough into balls and place them on a greased cookie sheet. Leave the dough to rise again for 30 to 50 minutes. Once the dough has fermented, it can be baked as is to make bread or rolled out into a flat dough for pizza.